Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Davis, in this series on the network of global corporate control. Today's segment is pre-recorded and is called Team Humanity. Thanks to DCTV, Carmen Stanley, studio producer, and Mark Leake, director. Crystal Branton is the audio and prompter. Let me tell you about how I wrote this segment because it tells you a lot about Team Humanity. I'm relying on Team Humanity to help me write and produce and distribute this video. The fact is that there is a real coalition for the rule of law that consists of all of the people in the world who know about the corruption in the international financial system. We're taking back our world, and we're all working together to do it. The fact of the matter is that the change is inevitable, like dominoes falling. And what is more, the banking cartel knows this. I'm sitting here typing the script for the pre-recorded segment very early on the day that we're shooting 2 segments at DCTV. It took me a long time to write the teleprompter for the live segment. I went to sleep with only a few of the notices that show me what people are retweeting. I will share these with you a bit later. I knew that the gremlins in my computer and the people who email me would have something for me to use because they always come through. They did, and I just tweeted this, and it will be incorporated later for the segment that we're going to be viewing on the 15th of August, called Team Humanity, in the series on the network of global corporate control. I also heard yesterday from the advisor who's been telling me about the advanced weaponry that knocked me down from the back and made me hit my head very hard on the ground a couple of weeks ago. My neck, it was sore at the time I was writing the teleprompter. It's from whiplash, but it's not too bad. This advisor also told me about the weapons that the ophthalmologist was using who wrote a prescription for eyeglasses that the banking cartel stole from my home. This lets the banking cartel know that we're on to them. When we clean up the corruption in the world's money system, we will be sure to remove these weapons now that we know what they are. The banking cartel deleted my email to the man who contacted me from Hungary. This was first included in what I tweeted to you, and then the banking cartel took it out. What didn't the banking cartel like? I told Andros, that's not his real name, by the way, that it was useless for him to contact me because the Global Debt Facility and the World Bank were going to leave things up to the people in their own countries during the global currency reset. When Andros contacted me in March for the first time, he asked me for contact information for a person who was translating my videos into Hungarian. This time, when Andros contacted me again, I told Andros that I wasn't going to serve as his intermediary. We are not talking about a new world order. When local villages and towns clean up corruption, starting at grassroots levels, this is just the opposite of the new world order. I also added a document about the war on cash and the RFID chip. I had intended to include these documents and somehow forgot them. When I proofread my tweet, I realized what I had forgotten, and so I added them back. How could I have forgotten to include these documents when I first uploaded the tweet? This was probably electromagnetic scalar military mind control weaponry. These weapons have been directed against me so many times that I can usually work around them, as in this case. This is a long-winded introduction. I'm trying to tell you too many things at once. I'm very excited to be in the middle of humanity when we keep on resisting the banking cartel and their attempted control. This is in the global currency reset. What is the global currency reset? The power to issue currency is very important and can be a very good source of corruption. That's why we're going to take away this power from the central bankers. This needs to be done in a way that doesn't collapse the international financial system or start World War III. We're able to do this gradually because the World Bank and International Monetary Fund were especially created by Ferdinand Marcos and José Rizal to administer the wealth of the world in the global debt facility. We know that José Rizal intended to end that scam called country debt because Rizal included the Treaty of Versailles bonds in the global debt facility. These bonds have put all the central banks into bankruptcy. That is how we can wind the central banks down now. So the global currency reset is exchanging the paper currencies issued by the members of the Bank for International Settlement, which includes the Federal Reserve, for local currencies issued by villages and towns, and for national currencies minted out of the gold that is in the global debt facility, which is managed by the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. What is really happening in China and Korea, and the rest of the world for that matter, and a hint in the tweet that I am showing you on the teleprompter, I show the difference between reality and fake news. What does a critical mass of humanity, including the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF, which manages the monetary gold reserves of the nations, for whom I speak ever since the World Bank's annual meeting of 2015 in Peru, think is happening? They like the kinds of documents I post on the internet. These documents were included in a link that's in the teleprompter. What really happened? The acting president of the World Bank, Bertrand Badre, tried to invalidate the global debt facility containing the world's assets and issued an arrest warrant for me on Interpol. What happened then? I invalidated what Badre tried to do, and I had Badre fired. This tweet is telling me that the banking cartel is losing the war on cash. People are taking back the power to issue their currency from the central bankers. The banking cartel is getting wound down because it's bankrupt and because it has misused the power to issue currencies. Humanity is going to end the corruption in the world's money system through the global currency reset that we've been talking about. The Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF, for whom I speak, and the Coalition for the Rule of Law have decided to wind down the banking cartel because it is insolvent. That means bankrupt. The banking cartel owes humanity much more than humanity owes the banking cartel. A non-response blows the lid off the corruption. Did anybody hear Yale Law School's new dean explain why the detailed legal information in a video which I showed is incorrect? If it were incorrect, don't you think you would have heard by now? The banking cartel is using worn-out, discredited media to try and blunt the message that the world's people are entitled to the world's wealth. The world's wealth is on deposit in a trust fund. Meanwhile, the United States military is riled up about being ordered to nuke U.S. citizens in Charleston and fire a first nuclear strike against Russia. This happened for the nuclear strike, that was in 2015, I believe, and the nuke for Charleston was intended in 2013. The U.S. Military War College has already told us and the military that there are coalitions that are stronger than the banking cartel, and I'm speaking for this coalition. YouTube has put a comment up on my video of the previous live segment at DC TV, which says that I never give real proof. And the video gave very detailed proof of my legal claim that the United States Constitution of 1789 is not in effect. Yale Law School's new dean and the former dean were unable to give any arguments to show that I was wrong. Their silence is deafening. Brandon is asking when the first domino is going to fall. The first domino that's going to fall is when Germany and Japan call on the United States under their treaties in the status of forces agreements. I already told their defense attachés that the United States is going to honor these treaties. This is what I said to Mr. David S. Ferriaro, the archivist of the United States, whose job it was to certify the bogus electoral college that was not in place because the United States Constitution of 1789 is not in force in effect. The first document in my tweet, which was a week ago, is the global war on cash. Alice Castano uploaded an article on my Facebook page which tells us that Visa is bribing merchants to stop taking cash. Alice has been showing us very interesting articles for a long time. The merchants are not enthusiastic. Visa is part of the network of global corporate control. So it's telling us that the war on cash is a confrontation between the banking cartel and humanity. In last week's segment on DCTV, we learned that this war between humanity and the bloodline families, Templars, Jesuits, bankers, Fuenicans, etc., has been going on since the previous Ice Age in 9200 BC. I'm writing the teleprompter for a second time because the program on my computer stopped working. I had just typed that humanity has already won this war in its collective unconscious. That was the reason for my comment. The Federal Reserve and the rest of the network of global corporate control is insolvent and is getting wound down. Somebody told me that I should file a motion in court. I won't do this because the courts are all corrupt. And I tweeted this, and I said humanity is winding down the banking cartel in receivership in the global debt facility. This must follow as the night the day. That's a quote from Hamlet, Act 1, Scene 3, line 79. In the middle of August, people started contacting me about the Federal Reserve's bogus offers. The Fed is trying to save its fake paper currency by offering to pay people's bills. Many of the people who start out by accepting an offer from the Fed like this are reporting that they're running into problems. The debt forgiveness is being rescinded. They should know better. They're not contracting with honorable people. The Fed is not an honorable entity, and the people that work there are not honorable people. This is a slippery slope. On page 6 of a tweet I wrote to Sandra, I have stated many times before that it's necessary to end the corruption in our money system before we address our spirituality. I'm therefore disregarding the reference in your letter to me of the 24th of July to Yahweh. You're asking me to advise you how to access fiat money in the Federal Reserve Bank. This is when we're in the middle of a global currency reset to end fiat currencies. With this question, you're asking me to put you ahead of other people and to perpetuate a corrupt system. This is when the banking cartel is trying to pit people against each other, using the old divide and conquer. You want to side with the banking cartel? Don't forget, the banking cartel is able to simply print the fiat money. This is what happens when people allow bankers to issue their currency. One of the banking cartel agents tried a long time ago to bribe me this way, but I saw through the trap. And then I gave an answer to Eddie Goddess in a link that you can find in the teleprompter. And I also made some other tweets on the same subject, which you can find in the teleprompter. And we're scrolling down, pardon the brief intermission. Returning to Sandra in the letter. You're not above anybody else, and my advice to you is that you should not perpetuate the corrupt fractional reserve fiat currencies that are issued by the Fed and the rest of the banking cartel. My advice to everyone is the same, and it's public. My advice is to help the merchants in your villages and towns agree to the issuance of local currencies and switch over to using local currencies to the extent that you can. And I'm giving you in the teleprompter some information about how other villages have issued local currencies. There's no one right way. Each town needs to decide for themselves how they want to issue their own currency. In your search for truth, it's important for you to ask a handful of people close to you to help you figure out and overcome how you may be influenced by the banking cartel. That's false history and other inferior education, false media, and DARPA electromagnetic scalar weaponry, and this is quite prevalent. It's being used against people in the civilian population, and those people that are being targeted against, they're called targeted individuals. Meanwhile, enough people have done their homework, and there's a critical mass of people that are working hard to take back our world. We're all indebted to these individuals, many of whom have been protecting the rest of us. I'm going to publish your letter and this response after whiting out any information that would identify you. And that's in the teleprompter. This morning, the gremlins in my computer showed me 2 tweets. I was rereading one, and it's simply priceless. There's a link to a letter from a woman whose daughter was injured by vaccines, who's asking me very sharp questions, which I would like to share with you if we have the time. I'm asking followers in my social media and the board of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to ignore the lies and clean up the corruption. Chances are that we succeed in doing this. They're above 90% based on the power transition model from the U.S. Department of Defense. And in March, a reader wanted me to document how some of the alternative media are misleading people. Zero Hedge, Veterans Today, Alex Jones. Dear Olga, please see my response in all caps. My condolences on the injuries to your daughter. This is the letter that I was going to read you. Olga wrote, subject, may I please ask you a couple of questions? Dear Karen, first, thank you for your work. Would you be so kind to clarify for me a couple of questions, please? 1. Is it correct our country's government is a corporation doing business as United States? This makes our president a CEO of a corporation. Congress are employees of this corporation. What can we possibly expect from them other than serving the corporation and its profits? And I said to that question, you're entirely correct. The second question, Section 26 of the IRS Code says that residents of Washington, D.C. or employees are liable for income tax. This doesn't include most people in the U.S. I did purchase a well-researched letter and send it to the IRS, which is a private corporation, money-gathering arm of the Federal Reserve. Another corporation. No answer. As equally, no invitation to court either. Many people seem to think this is the truth, and yet few take action on this. In a way, if this is true, then it wouldn't be surprising that all the corporate officers aren't responding to your letters. Yes, you're correct. Third question. Is it true that President Reagan has requested a report on where the income taxes are going when he just came into office, and that it has been found that the money is all going offshore? Yes, that's correct. It's the Grace Commission report, and the original URL was removed, and so I put another one in the teleprompter. And the second version doesn't contain the useful summary of the censored one. And actually, somebody put that back on the internet with the link. So you can find the original one when you click on the link in the teleprompter. Google also came up with another report blaming the IMF. The truth is that the government budget is funded by drug sales, human trafficking. The network of global corporate control is trying to get people to hate the IMF so that they won't believe that the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF are responsible for the U.S. monetary gold reserves and the gold reserves of other nations. Here's another study on the Grace Commission, and you can find that in the teleprompter. And to confuse people, here's another study. And the fourth question. If people aren't paying income tax, where does government get money to build infrastructure? When I have this conversation with people who know less than me, they always ask this question. I'm not sure of the answer, but there are or were prosperous countries that don't have income tax, fractional reserve banking. And then my answer. See above, human trafficking, drug trafficking. Fifth question. I have a vaccine-injured daughter, and with laws changing, making vaccines mandatory, I left the USA to keep my daughter safe. Now that I have some idea about the fraud of corporate governments around the world, having, I assume, successfully dealt with the IRS, having written a letter to John Kerry saying, I resign the agency, and my name in capital letters, I dread and do not know how to live as a sovereign abroad, and yet feel it's my responsibility to know and walk the path. I'm an old woman with an adult handicapped daughter, but I too want to contribute to the truth and zero war around the world and zero the hunger, etc. I would very much appreciate even the shortest answer. Thank you so much. Wishing you every success in your pursuit on behalf of humanity. And so my response was wishing you every success as well. And then I say, the corruption is so deep that the entire legal, accounting, and journalism professions are indicted. Fortunately, enough people are critical thinkers and have followed logic to learn that the mainstream media and many alternative media outlets have been lying to them. Courageous, tenured academics have been removed from their universities because they recognize truth and understand how important it is to join the group that's tackling this corruption. Marilyn Barnwell is one of the early writers to cover the truth. Barnwell, who's working for the CIA, also wrote about Leo Wanta, a man who's trying to steal the world's assets for the CIA. Using social media and public access TV, I now have an audience in the U.S. military and public that's large enough to connect with the coalition on the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF. The power transition model from the U.S. Department of Defense predicted with 90 to 95% likelihood that this would happen. This coalition for the rule of law is now going to implement the global currency reset to replace unconstitutional Federal Reserve notes for U.S. dollars out of the United States monetary gold reserves that are administered by the Board of Governors of the World Bank and IMF. There will be local currencies for villages and towns, and at first, U.S. Treasury dollars out of paper until the aurum, which is gold pressed thin, until that can be minted. People are going to find resistance from those people who have difficulty accepting the extent of their betrayal by the elites. Leave these people alone for the time being and reach out to the people who can follow the logic. Those people who cannot accept the extent of the corruption are going to catch up with the rest of us later. One of the times my computer froze was when I told you that Marilyn Barnwell was working for the CIA and that Lee Wanda was also working for the CIA. And then there's a link from Marilyn Barnwell article in the teleprompter, which you can read. I've had to rewrite the teleprompter so many times, so I'm going to quit while I'm ahead. The computer froze again when I was elaborating on how I was injured this week when I was forcefully knocked down from the back and hit my head on the ground as I fell. That's actually not this week. It was the first week in August. Let me repeat that I am the canary in the coal mine. So long as I'm involved, I'm going to be telling you what's going on. Now, as you can see, I didn't have time to really finish the full 30 minutes, so I'm going to speak to you extemporaneously. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is a quality that is very useful. It's called uncertainty avoidance, and it was discovered by a sociologist named Geert Hofstede. That's spelled Hofstede. And it turns out that there are some cultures where this is a quality that's in short supply. You can find this out by a list of questions. You fill out a questionnaire. And I'm luckily one of the people that has a high tolerance for uncertainty. What that means is that you sit back and allow reality to assert itself. You don't necessarily jump to conclusions. I'd like to thank you for listening to another segment in this series on the network of global corporate control. Team Humanity is working together to wind down the banking cartel that has caused so much misery and corruption. The people who don't think there is any progress ought to try and imagine how this segment is coming across to the banking cartel.